What do you make of the proposals that came out from the provincial government yesterday with respect to cannabis legislation?
Thanks. We have really three areas that we need to continue to have conversations with the province about. One area that we're a bit agnostic about, but I have an opinion on, and one area where I have a personal opinion, which is not the City of Calgary's opinion, but I feel the need to share it. So, the three things that we need to talk about are zoning. And by the way, let me back up and say, we're looking at this entirely from a public health lens and figuring out how we can maintain health and vibrancy within communities. So, and unfortunately, I think the province's cannabis framework doesn't really take that view as much as I would have liked it to. So the first is zoning. So we really have to think hard about where these things will go. We want to avoid proliferation, we want to avoid concentration in disadvantaged areas. Well, we want to avoid concentration anywhere, really. So we're going to have a lot of things to say and think about what the zoning looks like. The second is around public consumption. You know, even before I was mayor, I was a strong advocate for our various smoking bylaws that restrict secondhand smoke exposure. So we have to be really careful about that, about nuisance factors and so on around public consumption. The third is really around money. The province has stood up and said to the federal government, hey, we have to do all the regulatory work, so we should get the lion's share of the tax. Well, the municipalities have to stand up and say the same thing, that if we have to do the enforcement, the prevention, the education work, we're going to have to get compensated for that. And that the provincial government's framework is a bit quiet on that. The fourth thing, which is interesting, has to do with whether the retail networks will be controlled by the province or they'll be private networks. The city has advocated for them to be private, and frankly I just don't see how the government could build a retail network under government control that quickly. The final issue is my own personal one. I am very interested in brain science, and I am absolutely convinced that by the brain science that says the brain is still developing at 18, and I am disappointed that the province chose to go with an age of 18 rather than a higher age for legal consumption. I understand the arguments for why they did it, but I remain disappointed. And I will say that, again, if I'm still in this job in a couple of weeks, our number one priority is going to be to keep people safe and to keep cannabis out of the hands of children.
So, and you talk about avoiding proliferation. You talk about public consumption. Do you have any? Do you think the city needs to take any extra steps in order to reduce the amount of spaces?
This is a discussion that we're going to have to continue to have once the province finalizes its ideas, and we won't necessarily be able to have that answer by July 1st. That's something that could change over time as we see what the nuisance value or the nuisance factor. The nuisance factor of all of this is. We're going to definitely start with rules that are at least as strict as public smoking rules. I've got no interest in loosening or weakening those rules. But we have to move from there. You know, I know that when I was in Colorado recently, I was interested that you could smell it everywhere. And I'm told by folks who've gone to other areas where it is legal, really you can smell it everywhere. And that is a nuisance issue. So we really have to work through and figure out how we do that. There's also an open question that I do not yet have an answer to about cannabis lounges and what those look like. I certainly believe that any restrictions on indoor smoking needs to also apply to cannabis lounges, but what that licensing regime would look like, even if those would be legal, that remains to be talked about.
All right, folks, I need to wrap this up.
This is going to be a lot of
Last
policy.
question.
This is going to be a lot of policy, and there are three people running right now talking about the economy, but this is going to be, you know, marijuana is going to be a lot of decisions that are going to happen in the next term. Are you going to be coming out with any sort of platform with that regard?
Well, we kind of already have. The good news is this is not that politicized, but it is a ton of work. It requires 15 different business units of the city to work together. So I was actually very pleased that the city was able to pass its cannabis response framework at our last meeting. Was it the last meeting prior to the summer break or the last meeting before we broke? Can't remember. Point is, we passed our overall framework, and now it's a matter of just working. We have a marijuana lead. What a great title that would be within the city. And as I say, 15 different business units working together. Quite frankly, the things I've been saying have not been controversial at all, except for the age limit around the council table. So even while there's an election going on, the work of the city continues. I'm still the mayor. I do that work every day, and so we'll just keep working.